Welcome to Zimmerman Podcast, episode 10. Today, I'm chatting with Tawnya Falkner, the creator of Grand Courtage sparkling wines. While there's obvious crossover between myself in the wedding industry and Tawnya in sparkling wine, today Tawnya and I focus more on the overlap we have in creating powerful brands, turning passion projects into actual monetized businesses, reverse engineering creative ideas, and how to define your destination so you can plan your journey. Tawnya has so much wisdom to share. Whether you're an entrepreneur or just someone trying to create an intentional life, this episode is a cannot miss for you. I don't want to waste another second, so let's dive in.
Welcome to the Zimmerman Podcast with your host, CEO, wedding professional, educator, and mom, Jessica Zimmerman. In just 2 years, Jessica went from facing bankruptcy to taking home a six-figure salary. She turned a business-saving $100,000 loan into a $1 million empire. As a creative entrepreneur, a healthy work-life balance seems just as unattainable as a six-figure income. But Jessica Zimmerman is here to show you it's possible. With the right tools and insider tips and some hard work, your craziest dreams can become your daily routine. If you set some boundaries and commit to healthy changes, you can create a business and a life you love. So let's make your business work for you.
So I have Tawnya Falkner with me here. She is the CEO of Grand Courtage, the amazing sparkling wine brand. Tawnya is a serial entrepreneur, like so many of you. When I first asked Tawnya if she wanted to be on the podcast, I showed her the topics I wanted to cover for this season, one of them being about annual planning. And she immediately knew she wanted to chat about this with me. So we're going to talk about how to intentionally plan for success, because you can't get where you want to go without a roadmap, especially when the road is taking you to France, right, Tawnya?
Absolutely. And I constantly say that if you don't define the destination, you can't create the roadmap to get there.
Absolutely. So tell me about your trip to France as you saw the need to fill a space in the sparkling wine industry. Like, what was lacking and how did you identify the need and realize you could do something to fix it and make money?
Absolutely. So I was living in San Francisco at the time, which is, of course, very food and wine centric, and Napa's in the backyard and things like that. And I always loved bubbles, drank a lot of them, with friends. But in the US, it's been so much, weddings, New Year's, I got a raise. But I've always thought that sparkling is the most versatile from a food pairing. And the more I looked around, I was always surprised by the level of traditionalism and lack of innovation in the French category, where it's domain this, chateau that, plain green glass, nothing that really grabs your eye. And so, I started doing research, and the more I looked, the more I realized that there really was this gap on both price, palette, and packaging.
So obviously this is a saturated industry. I hate when people think they shouldn't do something just because they're entering into a saturated industry, don't you? How did you solve old problems in new ways and present like a different sparkling wine option and market to set yourself apart in the industry?
Well, I took that gap that I saw and those three P's, and ultimately, when you look at the fact that most Americans still say, "I'm drinking champagne," and whether it's Cook's or Andre or Dom Perignon, it's champagne, and there's such an association with champagne in France. So I thought if I could make an affordable French sparkling wine, so we produce in Burgundy, not champagne, so that allows us a little bit more artistic latitude. And at the end of the day, ours is only like $18 retail versus a lot of the champagnes, $50, $60, $100. So I started with a value proposition of how do you make something that's affordable and that you can celebrate or commiserate every day. Secondly, from that packaging standpoint, and probably most importantly, 70% of wine in the US is consumed based on packaging alone. So I thought I was an architect and real estate developer prior to wine. So I say I used to design buildings, now I design bottles. Because when you think about that spot on a shelf, that 4-inch slot, or a name on a wine list is very expensive real estate. So what's the compelling proposition to make somebody want to buy you? And then lastly, from a palate standpoint, Americans have a sweeter palate than Europeans, as do Asian, African American, Hispanic. So ours is not a sweet wine, but I stylized it so it has just a little bit more fruit and floral on the finish. So it's really that palate pleaser for virtually anyone, and very cuisine and cocktail friendly as well.
I love what you said about the 4-inch space on a shelf. I used to, before I went down the whole wedding industry road, I used to be a manager and a buyer for a kitchen store. And I remember the owner once telling me that it doesn't matter how expensive or inexpensive the product is, that shelf space is expensive real estate, and that you have to pay attention to it, and you have to pay attention to what's selling and what isn't selling. You can't just have something on a shelf because it looks good or it's cute or it's eye catching. It has to be able to do both. And so, was branding a big part of carving a new path for yourself? Like, how does investing in branding help you craft a cohesive and a consistent brand voice? I think that I'm going to ask you that question. You're going to get to answer it, but I do think that a lot of my audience struggles with branding and what that means. And I always say, a pretty logo does not a brand make, does not a business make. And so, tell me a little bit about your branding path.
Well, and I'll answer that question specifically, but sort of I start with the why, because people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And Simon Sinek and a lot of others, you can read great books on that really talk about that. But it's like getting at the ethos of why you're doing it, because then it resonates in the hearts and minds. And what's funny, you don't say minds and hearts, you say hearts and minds, right? And so it's like you've got to speak to somebody at an emotional core. And so when you think about branding, it's everything that you do. It's a logo, it's a package, it's the font, it's color, it's the imagery that you use, and like you're trying to transport people, in a brief second, whether it's an Instagram post, it's a magazine ad, it's a billboard, which we're not there yet, but all of those things, it's like you only have a couple seconds to grab somebody's attention. And going back to what we were just talking about, the 4-inch slot on a shelf for a wine bottle, when you think about you're going down a supermarket aisle, there's thousands of products, and even in wine there's hundreds. And so what's going to make your brand stand out comparative to somebody else? And so it's all this subconscious things, like people don't really think about every single aspect, but it's asymmetry, it's color, it's the things that stand out that are different. And so my bottle, I was very intentional about creating something which is timeless and elegant, really evokes that feeling of an expensive champagne, but at the end of the day is very modern, fresh, clean. I use Tiffany jewelry as my inspiration. And you think about Tiffany, it never goes out of style. And whether you're 20 or you're 90, it resonates with virtually every demographic. And, when you think about something, I don't want to be a one-time a year purchase. I want to be a weekly or a monthly. And so the price point was intentional. But when you really think about, you're trying to elevate the everyday with, or at least that's my intention with wine. And so it's every little tiny detail of the design, every pixel, everything. And so I think it's so important to covet brand and constantly come back to that with your team, and don't take it for granted that everyone knows, because we all start to miss the mark. And if you don't come back and really talk about it and reinforce it and what it stands for, what it looks like, hey, it's not okay to use that font, like even how you dress and how you show up in the marketplace too, that all is a reflection of brand.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I love that you said that. It's so true. Like, you are a reflection of your brand if it's your business, and you've got to, one of the things we learned with branding when we finally, and you can't do it right off the bat. Maybe you do what you can until you can do more. But when we finally got to work with our incredible brand manager and expert, she created this brand board for us, and it just makes life so simple. It's like, okay, those are the colors we use. Those are the fonts we use. And I don't know, it just makes life a lot easier.
Well,
So
and
going
I was going to say, if I may, just on that point, what's hard is when you're brand new, you don't have a ton of money. And so you're just trying to bootstrap it and you're doing it yourself. But there are a few fundamentals that it's like, you know what, if this is going to be your legacy of the brand for the long term, there's some areas you should invest more in on the front end. And it's like everything comes back to brand. And so focusing on that early. And some things are happy accidents, like Nike swoosh. There was a whole ridiculousness of how it actually came to be, and it ended up being this like last minute thing, and I believe an intern or something like that. And but look at what Nike has now become and what one little symbol resonates for us. So I think spending more on branding and thinking about it more than people give it credit for on the front end.
you seem to have a lot of passions going back to, architecture and real estate and just passion projects. One thing that I always say to my students is you need to decide if what you're interested in is a hobby or a business, because not every single thing that you're interested in has to turn into a money making business, right? So, how do you decide? Like when you're someone who you love wine and you love sparkling wine, like how do you decide, okay, this is more than a hobby? This is something that I actually want to turn into business?
And while I'm a creative type at the core, at the end of the day, it's like, do I think I can actually make money and really know your numbers? And it's interesting. I'm equally right brain, left brain. Yeah, almost to a fault sometimes. But it's like if you don't have a business plan, if you can't back it up with numbers, then really it should be a hobby and you have to be willing to like dig in. But I definitely use the term multi-passionate, and I used to feel bad about it and feel like, oh, do some people think I have ADD or I'm a little bit schizophrenic? But I really own the fact that I'm, innately curious, and I think that some people are entrepreneurs at the core. And I think it's coming down to, do I have it in me, and in which to spend the next 5 years hustling and really working hard, because there are virtually no overnight successes. It's 0.5% of businesses where they just skyrocket. And so it's, if this is a passion, is it something that you're willing to invest 50, 80, 100 hours a week for a couple years, and sometimes just to really get it going? And if the answer is no to that, keep it as a passion or your side hustle.
Yes, yes. You've got to do the work on the front end. You really do. You've got to, you can't just go in. I think so many people, they have an idea or a product, or someone says, oh my gosh, that's great. You should sell that. And they just go into the product that they're selling or the service that they're selling without actually knowing their numbers. And like you said, having an actual plan. So how do you set goals and then reverse engineer to get the result that you want?
Well, even with the brand, often say that I reverse engineered, because based upon that gap that I saw with the price palette packaging, I was like, okay, what do I need to create to fill that gap? So even fundamentally at brand and thinking of the very creation of a company, I started there. But then when it comes to a vision plan, or excuse me, planning for the long term, I actually start with a vision board, and it's like dream big, put it out there, and then think about where it is that I'm trying to go. What's that destination? Then you create the roadmap, like we were saying at the beginning. It's like, okay, break it down into incremental steps. And I start in early stages as truly it's a brain dump, whether it's just me or, I ask other people, or if it's, with my team when we launched our second brand, Trey Chic, it's like, do a brain dump, think about the questions, the ideas, and then, just put it all on paper, the pie in the sky, the pedantic little details, then set it aside for a couple days or a week or two and come back and like do another one, because things are percolating in the back of your mind. And then I think it's really important, talk to others and seek criticism. So much of it, we covet our ideas and we don't want to talk about it, and then we find out, like, oh, if we had just been more open, like, let somebody really pick it apart. What about this? What about that? You don't want to just take somebody's like, oh, don't do it, because people are always going to say, oh, you shouldn't do that, or that's too hard. And, there's a lot of naysayers, but take their questions, their concerns, their feedback, and let that influence the decisions on the front end. So, but while you're doing a business plan, get some insights from sort of a trusted little focus group of men and women, because that'll help you adjust early on.
That is a great piece of advice. And I think too, I always say, don't follow a bunch of people in your industry. And I actually got a really good piece of advice from a friend not too long ago who said, if you're looking to learn something new, for example, for me, looking to learn about podcasting, she said, do not listen to or do not purchase podcast courses from other people in the kind of female creative entrepreneur industry. Go study from completely different industries about podcasting, because a lot of times what we find is they might know something better, or we want to stand out a little more, or we just might look at it differently or learn it differently. It's just is such a good education to step outside of our own industry and to learn from other people. And I love what you said too about taking the criticism, which is hard for a lot of people. It's hard for a lot of people. We can be sensitive, and oftentimes it's our baby, right? I mean, this business was my first baby, and I've got 3 kids, and so I'm still saying that, and so it means a lot to me.
Totally. And I often say critique and criticism are your opportunity for correction. And so remove the ego. And if it's said from, especially like trusted people in your network, whether it's friends, family, people in and out of the industry, it's like if it's said from a place of love and you're like, I trust them, then realize it's like all of those things help you to be successful down the line, really.
Yes, 100%. I even say that with my world in the wedding industry, I used to, when I didn't book somebody in the very beginning, if I met with someone who, man, I really wanted to do their wedding and they did not book me, I ended up sending them a survey and asked them questions and I would say, I want to book more people like you in the future. Can you please take 2 minutes and answer this survey for me so that I can do better and I can start to hire, or I can start to reach more people like you? And just if I had gone into that with this perspective of I don't want to know, well, then I'm not ever going to change and do better.
Hmm.
But some of the things, like one of the things that we received was it was from the mom of the bride, and she said that my contract was hard to read. It was during the time that the watercolor fonts were really in,
Hmm.
and I didn't have a specific brand at that point. I was just faking it till I make it, doing the best I can, which sometimes that's what we have to do. I'm not knocking it. I certainly did that as well. And it was as simple as that, as like, I can just change that font. That was the only thing that was bothering her, was that she couldn't read my proposal and my contract very well, and she didn't wanna be unclear, and she didn't wanna have to constantly ask in every meeting, "What does this say bridesmaids? Is this 4 or 9?" You know what I mean? And I just thought, "Well, of course, let me change that." I would have never known that
Hmm.
had I not sent
Well,
that. So I
that's
think it's
such a great takeaway, and it's so silly and simple. But coming back to the brand, when you think about, I mean, the female or the wedding industry is very, female centric, so it's slightly different. But you think about so many industries that are so male dominated, and it's like knowing your audience of your end demographic. But for instance, like I am always presenting to distributors and trade accounts, which are 90% men. So we are a female centric brand. But the gatekeepers, all the people that are putting it on a shelf or on a wine list, are almost all men. So I have to think, I'm trying to sell to you, people in the wedding industry, like, the female, but understanding who's helping influence the decisions. And like, all right, pink and light colors and stuff may not resonate. And it seems so ridiculous, but it's like, that's just the gross reality. And whether it's conscious or subconscious, it's being aware of all those little things that ultimately will get you to yes.
No, that's fascinating. I think that's so fascinating, and I think that's why it's so important, and I hope the listeners understand, because you might be like, "Why are we listening? Why are we having an interview with someone in the wine industry?" Because we can learn so much. We can learn so much from someone that is in a different industry. So how did you learn to plan for success? Did someone teach you? Did you read books? Did you take some kind of class? Did college teach you this? Like, how did you figure out your own kind of road for success?
Um, well, in the present day, I am huge on podcasts, like you said. It's like I'm always listening to lots of things in and out of the industry. And for all entrepreneurs, I highly recommend like How I Built This with Guy Raz and some things like that, because you're constantly inspired. It makes you feel less crazy. You see how other people did it, and you're like, wow, it just triggers a new idea for me, or it just lets you see that it's not easy for anyone, and all the trials and tribulations are amazing to hear. But it's sort of interesting. I am not what a lot of people. I grew up in a three-street town, 400 people, first person to go to college. Like I don't come from a entrepreneurial family by any stretch, and I was always just innately curious. And I think that th- um, it's about being tenacious and resilient and learning to diffuse the no. And I think from out the gate, like, when I was young, it's like, oh, what college I wanted to go to, what internships I wanted to have. But I once had a boss that says no means maybe and maybe means yes. That's what his philosophy was, which at 21, it was very frustrating because he did not believe in impossibilities. But it really taught me that people are so quick to say no. And so it's like it gave me it's like creating the muscle of you need to constantly press, but why not? What about this? How about we try this angle? And so I think that early um, positioning from a boss and it's like go figure it out really gave me a lot of the skills. And take every job. I don't care if it's babysitting, you work at a an office and you're just doing some data entry, or all the corporate jobs you take, whatever. All along the way it's like developing the toolbox. And it's like I constantly tell people work for a small company because you get so much insights from that A to Z, versus if you work for this big corporation and you might be like this phenomenal company, let's say a Google or something, which is amazing, but you're very siloed. You only see an aspect of the business, versus a small company, you get to see every single thing and touch a lot, and you really can see the fruit of your labors coming to fruition. And so I just think that that's been one of my biggest assets, was like being able to work for a few small companies that gave me a lot of latitude and more responsibility I deserved early, because I was seeking the opportunities and expressing that curiosity.
My mind's kind of blown right now because I think that that is so incredible, just the way you said that. I went from college to I just always knew I wanted to own my own business. So I immediately went and worked for a very small business and a family run business, wanted to learn. So I've kind of always received all of the things. But you're right. If you go into a corporate world, you may just be learning one tiny aspect of the business. And I have a team member right now who, man, she just loves learning she wants to be on every team meeting because she thinks it's fascinating, to learn all the different parts, and how that really is such an education just to work within a smaller company.
Mm-hmm. People don't think, and it's like, oh, I've worked for some big corporations, and I felt so frustrated because I think if you're an entrepreneur at the core, you're like, oh my God, all this red tape and everything takes so long. But it also is best practices, and they become successful for a reason. And so I think it's good to have both sides and perspectives. And Shauna, who's my VP, she used to work at Mondavi, which is one of the biggest wineries. Hands down. And she says, I get to do way more with Courtage than I did at Mondavi, because there aren't different departments for everything.
Jessica's always teaching that your time is valuable. So is hers. So to make this podcast possible, we have sponsors. Here's a quick message about something Jessica loves.
If you go to Le Grand Courtage website at legrandcourtage.com, you'll see a stunning website that tells you everything you need to know about Tanya's brand and the products she sells. The truth is, whether you have a product-based business like Tawnya or a service-based business like I have with Zimmerman, you need a website that books clients, sells your product, and makes you money. Come spring 2020, I'm releasing a brand new resource that will guide you through creating a killer website that looks and feels like you. When you're done, you can celebrate with a big glass of Le Grand Courtage's sparkling wine. For a Zimmerman-sponsored celebration, head to the show notes for a discounted shipping code. And to find out more about creating your own beautiful website, go to awinningwebsite.com. That's awinningwebsite.com. Hey, are you loving this episode? If you've been listening thinking, oh gosh, I'm so glad I found this. This is exactly what I've been needing. Then I need you to do me a favor. Take a screenshot of this podcast and share it on your social media. I can't reach more listeners like you without your help. And these early days and weeks of the podcast are absolutely crucial to building the listener base we need so that we can keep producing content that is free to you and answers all your biggest business questions. So share this episode, tag me at Jessica Zimmerman _, and then get right back to listening. have you ever ventured into something new without a plan? And if you did you notice a big difference in getting the result you wanted when you set out without a strong plan?
For the type A perfectionist, I, as a general rule, really dig in and analyze. I have taken the leap a few times, and I think um, it's like parenthood or getting married or starting a business. You're never going to be fully ready, and so I think we have to give ourselves credit too that along the way, like all these tools, that we're amassing throughout our life, from childhood to where we are today gives you the resilience. And it's like trusting in what we innately know is more important. And I think some of that has come with age, where it's just that inherent confidence that you gain. That's like, you know what, I can do this. And I think as an adult, you realize too, most people don't have all the answers. And on a daily basis, you're just trying to figure it out. And so it's like if you have the tools and you're willing to put in the work, you can indeed um, most things are figure outable, right? At the end of the day, and it's realizing that no one has all the answers. I don't care, the head of the corporation, the president, whatever. It's like there's new circumstances and situations in an ever evolving economic landscape. How you market, how you advertise, and so it's like just iterations. And so, I actually moved to Thailand to build a resort. Before I moved to France and stuff. And it's like that was kind of a big leap of faith because, it's like totally different culture, totally unknown. And, just, but again, it's coming back to all the things that you've learned along the way that prepare you for that moment.
First of all, I want your life for just a minute because Thailand, France, like I would love that. Like, can we switch for just half a second? Um, I mean, I am serious, man, that would be amazing. But I love what you said about how first of all, I'm over here when you said everything that you just said with my hands up in the air and saying amen silently because I can't say it on top of you because I want people to hear it. But I'm over here like saying amen because two things. First of all, you're exactly right. Most people, or everybody, it's actually everybody, they don't know what they're doing. They might just be a little bit more ahead than you are. They might have had a little bit more experience somehow, some way, even if they're younger than you have had. And so they maybe just seem a little bit ahead, but they're still on their journey where they have a lot to still figure out. And what I loved so much about what you said, and you touched on this earlier, is that everything that you do is getting a new tool for your tool belt, for your toolbox, because you haven't landed where you're ultimately going to land, right? And so everything that we're doing, I'm sure there was something about Thailand that prepared you for
Mm-hmm.
wine, right?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I think you probably see this. It's like you have, I think comparison is the thief of joy. And so often it's like, I wish I could do that. Or, oh, and it's like suddenly people think you have some special powers. And it's like, look, I'm not a trust fund baby. Not any smarter than you. It's like, you're just figuring out. And people lack the confidence and they let fear hold them back. And I wrote an article at the beginning of the year called Three F Words: Fear, Failure, and Fraud. And, when you think about so much of that is what holds people back where that's that, imposter syndrome. Do I have what it takes? They're too afraid of like what it means. Do I have what it takes? Or, do I have enough money? Will I run out? And then that fear of failure. And so I think people just need to like realize that, period, point blank, no one has it all figured out and they're facing their fears every day too.
Oh my god, I wanna read that. Where can we read
Oh, I'll send
Fear,
it to you.
Failure, Fraud? Okay, and I'll put it in the show notes because that sounds so good, and I'm a big fan of alliteration, so I just like, the title even more so. Okay, so my industry, this is what I hear all the time. You may not hear this as much, but I hear, "Well, I'm just not a planner. Like, I just kinda like to fly by the seat of my pants. I like to just go with the flow." Like, I want to take these people, and I'm a little bit like you. I am divided. I took a gifts test not too long ago, and they were sharing the results, and they said, "Oh, this one, oh, this one is rare. Like, I think in all the years we've ever done this, I've only seen this one other time." It was me. It was mine because my gifts are just straight up down the middle. I have got some type A all over the place. And then I also have creative. And it sounds like you are a bit the same. But when I hear this, I get it, but I don't get it, because I think you can't have the freedom to do these fun creative things and to live this creative life without a plan. And it makes me sad for people who, I mean, not sad, but frustrated, because I just want to be like, oh, if I could just give you a little bit of that type A personality just for 1 month out of the whole year for you to get your plan together, then man, life is going to be so much better.
Totally true. Well, it's insane. Well, it's like there are a lot of phenomenal ideas, but people suck at implementation. So so many businesses that go out, it's not because they lacked for a great idea. It's because they didn't have the right team or they didn't plan. And sometimes it's just money or not the right time, not the right place, and you could have been an amazing planner. But a lot, it's because people really are poor at execution and follow through. And so just, that is a fundamental. And, I use the analogy, it's like a pilot's flying in the middle of the night. If they don't have the dashboard and instruments to follow, they truly are flying blind. And so you have to be willing to come back to that dashboard, because your instruments are what help you get there. So whether it's your numbers, whether it's, you know, um, uh, Nielsen data for the sales on the supermarket shelf, whatever. You have to use data in order to iterate or pivot. And I always am reminding my team, you can't manage what you can't measure. And it's like, hey, if you're not a planner, then you darn well better make sure you have a partner or hire somebody that can shore up your weaknesses. And you were talking about this gifts and the um, uh, sort of personality test. Now we did one at the team retreat like a year and a half ago. And now when I hire, I actually have somebody take one before they come on board. I said, there's no right or wrong answer, but rather it's recognizing that it takes all personalities in which to make a successful team. So it's really capitalizing on people's strengths and minimizing their weaknesses and figuring out how are they going to be the best fit to the organization, growing the brand, making for a successful business. And so I think it's getting real with what your own strengths and weaknesses are. But if you're not willing to plan, you darn well better have somebody that is.
Amen. Oh my goodness. Okay, every listener out there who heard what you just said knows that I now want to take you out for lunch, and I want to buy you a gift, and I want to just hang out with you all day, because I could not be in more alignment with you talking about strengths. I feel so much for these solopreneurs who are trying to do it all by themselves, because you just can't. You just can't. You are going to be on a hamster wheel. And man, what makes a great company is the amazing strengths of other people. And the more strengths that you have, the better that company's going to be. And you've got to recognize your own weaknesses, and you've got to hire to your weaknesses. And I also love what you said earlier about your why. And man, we're going to link that YouTube video that Simon talks about his why, because that's such a crucial part. And when you're planning, when we were talking about people who don't take the time to plan, I think we do this every single year. The team and I will sit down and we go over, is this still our why? What went well? What didn't go well? How can we make sure that what didn't go well never happens again? And I think that video is such a beautiful place to start with. And I want to just let you know right now up front, I'm going to be stealing this from you. I'm going to be taking it. I'm going to be, I don't know, I might get it tattooed. I don't know, because I have never heard it and I love it. You can't manage what you can't measure. Oh,
I'm glad it resonated, right? Because it's so true, and it's like, and I think too with the creative types, it's like, oh, I'm not a planner. I don't like details. It's like, you know what? Shift it and see it as a game of like, all right, if I want to be an artist, if I want to be a wedding planner, if I want all the things that the beauty and the creative things that feed our soul, instead shift and say, if I can learn to appreciate what these measures, the numbers, the planning gives me so that it allows me to be successful in what I really want to do and what it makes me happy, then I think by just that subtle distinction, it helps you realize that it's for the greater good rather than seeing it as an annoyance. And with that personality test that we do, when I give everyone the results, at the very top, I said, everything that irritates us from others can lead to an understanding of ourselves. It's a quote from Carl Jung. And I just think it's so important to remember. It's like, everything that irritates us from others can lead to an understanding of ourselves, right? And so it's like learning to appreciate those other things, because sometimes that irritation is because it is what we truly lack.
Okay. Talk to me about knowing your numbers. You have a product-based industry, and that can necessitate hard numbers more than a service-based industry in some ways. How do you reconcile what you've planned with the numbers you see in front of you, and how do you adjust when the numbers aren't lining up with what you've originally planned?
Um, an inventory business is no joke. I'll tell you that. Wow, it's I not coming from real estate development. It's like people are willing to lend on dirt and buildings and stuff all day long, but no one really wants to own inventory and have to figure out how to sell it. And so it's been a huge challenge, because you end up with a gap between your payables and receivables. And being that I produce in France and have 45 days just on water to get from France to California, it creates massive cash flow gaps. And so it's a supply chain, and trying to figure out cash flow needs is very challenging. And sort of, talk about needing to be focused on um, all the details and planning. That's imperative in an inventory business. Whenever you have to make sure that you don't have out of stocks and all these things. And so you often get off plan. And coming back to that, you can't manage what you can't measure. It's like weekly, bi-weekly, monthly, we are digging in and looking at a gauge of where we stand, so that it's like I have to adjust and plan for both from a product standpoint as well as a number standpoint. And if you have investors, or if you have a banker, I believe in being transparent and talking about it early if you have issues, because that builds trust. And it's like, projections are just that. And we all aim, and again, if you don't aim high, you're not going to grow big. And so I think you all have to be lofty, because it's motivating you and your team to try to achieve this bigger goal. But when you are missing plan, if you have outside people involved, communicate that and make sure you understand why and what you're doing to fix it. And sometimes it's like, oh, yeah, the economy shifted, there's a new product that came on board, or there was a hurricane that shut down the marketplace for 3 weeks, and so that's why Florida's down, or whatever it may be. But that's where that that you can't manage what you can't measure comes into play. And so really keeping your pulse on things, and so making sure, if it's not your forte to understand that, like, make sure that you have somebody on your team that can help with that. But it's like, constant iteration and adjustment of um, your numbers, and trying to make sure that you can plan accordingly, so that you don't have to have layoffs of people or things like that, right? It's always coming back to that.
Right. And I think what numbers allows you to do is to work smarter, not harder, right? And I think that it's interesting, inventory. Oh, inventory. So when I was working at that kitchen store back at the beginning of my, career days, I think inventory became a blessing and a curse, right? It's you never have what you need, and you got to ship it as quickly as you can, and then you like having back stock of the things that go well, to the point where now, like, I always have our garage, we always have back stock of toilet paper, of paper towels, of everything. Like, my garage is set up like a back room in a store, because we will have back stock. I never want to run out. But I was listening to a radio show the other day of a man who he's a designer, and an interior designer, a brilliant interior designer, and he designs these tiles that are sold at Home Depot. Now he has a manufacturer, right, who manufactures this product for him, and he was talking on this radio show about his frustrations of, he said, when I look at the numbers, 90% of people are buying this one specific design. He said, don't you think the manufacturer would look at those numbers and go, oh, I need to make a whole lot more of that design and a whole lot less of these others? He says, the one that everyone wants is always out of stock. And then people have to wait 9 weeks for the shipment. And when people go to Home Depot, they're not going there to have to wait. They need it now. It's instant. They're doing a weekend project. And I think, oh my gosh, we've got to get them. I mean, like me in my car, just listening to this radio show is like, I mean, we got to get on the phone with the manufacturer. Somebody's got to be reading these numbers. Like that is so much money missed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's just, and you probably deal with this too if you have. Now I need you to educate me a little bit on your wine business. So you have got, do you have more than one? I know you have 2 lines.
I have 2 wines and then I have 5 SKUs in total. So we've got the standard size bottle, and then
Tell
we
everyone what a SKU is for those who don't know.
sorry. A the scan bar that you see on a bottom of any product is called a SKU. So it's what scans on the register. So we have 5 different products: a Blanc de Blanc and rosé sparkling wine in the large format, standard size, as well as the little mini baby bottles. And then we have a Très Chic rosé, which is a still Provence style rosé. And so I do all my production in France, and then ship everything to the U.S.
Now, is a baby bottle, is that something that you look at and go, "Oh, that seems like other people on the market are doing that. Maybe that's a good thing to have." And then when you see the numbers, is it a good product to have? Do you like, because that's something that's different, right,
Mm-hmm.
than your normal bottle of wine. Sorry, I don't have all the lingo
That's all
down
right.
in the wine industry. Sorry. I'm doing the best I can. But that is a different product. Like, for example, with floral design, you have everyday floral, and then you might do a la carte, and then you might do full design. But just because you have a new service or a new product within that line, that doesn't mean it's always a good idea. But you do need to try it.
Mm-hmm.
And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it's okay to say that didn't work and to pull it off the shelf, right? So
Absolutely.
how do you go about things like that?
Well, one, I think to your last point, you need to be able to be willing to fail fast. And so try something and then cut bait if you don't think that it's going to work. And you can fairly quickly tell sometimes. But, there's counter philosophies on products and things like that. But I personally believe, some things become your loss leaders, right? When we say the baby bottles, they're the 187 kind of beer bottle size, which are of course great for the wedding industry and favors and parties and things like that. But we find that is great for grab and go at a retail where, that individual size, somebody's like, oh, you know what? It's only $5, $6, $7. I'll pick up one of those and go home and try it. Or at restaurants, it's great for by the glass because they don't have to worry about any waste and the product going flat. And so when we produce the 187s, they are very expensive compared to our 750s. On a value basis, it's not as great for the consumer. For us, the margins aren't anywhere near as big, but it's that trial. And so it gives you a consumer the opportunity to try it. And because from a branding standpoint, you think every single person that has one of these little mini bottles in their hand, or if they're served the bottle at a wine bar, they're getting the glass and the bottle. And so it's really reinforcing brand. So part of it was trial for me, and part of it was intentional branding. And out the gate, I knew we needed to make some big wins to sort of put us on the map. So I actually started courting Virgin America and thought if I could get my brand on there, because it's business travelers and young, hip consumers and things like that, it would be really terrific. And Branson's all about taking risk. And so within 1 year of launching, I started going after Virgin, and subsequently, it took about a year to get to yes, but finally they did. And they bought 200,000 bottles of our small format. And I negotiated first position on the screen and talk about a way to build your brand and put you on the map. And that opened doors for distributors. And so, long answer to your question, but with the 187s, it was very intentional of how do I help build my brand quicker, get into airline. We're in a lot of hotel mini bars, great for weddings, things like that, so that you're getting a lot of touch points, because when you're new and small, you can't afford marketing and advertising. So instead, it's like, what's your entree and way in order to build brand?
That is intentional planning right there. And I always say too, like if somebody says no, that doesn't mean no. That just means not yet from them, or no from them, but that doesn't mean no. That just means I'm going to get a yes somewhere else. So I love that you thought outside of the box, and it's not just getting a print advertisement or something like that. You can think outside of the box of how you can get your brand, your name, your company out there into the world. That is a great story. I love that so much.
Got to be scrappy, and because you're never going to be able to outspend the big guys, so you better figure out a different way in which to create that buzz about it. And and sometimes you have to spend money, sometimes you don't, but it's more that positioning. And I was going to say one other thing about knowing your numbers, if that's okay.
Please do.
Um, so knowing your numbers is so important because for the most part, either you're going to get a loan, you're going to have to raise, capital along the way, whatever it may be. And so, one thing no one told me at the start, and I think it's so important because it fundamentally influences that roadmap. What is your exit plan? Is it legacy and creating something for your family to pass down? Is it, I want to build and sell in 5 years? Is it, hey, I just really looking for a recurring revenue stream? And, if someday I sell it, great. But really, it's just, this is going to be my income, for our lifestyle. It's going to change and you have to be willing to iterate over time, but kind of know what the direction is you're heading because it really impacts so much of the things that you have to do along the way because I've had to raise capital being in an inventory business and it's like that's a really hard thing. And so having a strong understanding of your market gap, your numbers, and being able to convey that unique selling position and what your exit plan is, because if you're trying to get a loan or exit and sell the company, either of those, they want to know what your plan is. And I think a lot of people go into business not really having that exit defined.
Yes, and it goes back to knowing if you're a hobby or a business. A hobby may not have an exit plan because they're just thinking, I'm just going to do this when I want to do it because I love to do it. But if you want to build a business, you need to think about that exit plan. Is your business sellable? Can you build this? And listen, no one's going to buy a business if they can't see the numbers, right? So it's so, so true. Do you live in France? Do you speak French?
I lived there for a year and a half when I was developing everything. Now I just go a couple times a year, depending on stages of production. I have a phenomenal team there, and sadly, I am not completely fluent. It's such a hard language, and I joke that things really got lost in translation because when you think about smell, flavor, texture, all the things that you describe with taste, and it's really did get lost in translation of like, okay, well, I want it to smell and this like that. And you're like, huh? Like, it was just, so it's sort of funny, like how much English I ended up having to use with my team in order to get exactly what I wanted.
I took French in high school and it was a nightmare. I don't know how I graduated. I think the teacher felt sorry for me. Like I have no idea. Here's the thing. If you're wanting to start a business, you need to know your numbers and you need a plan. When you have a plan, you have freedom. That's why I created a free resource to help you figure out what you need to make financially to make your business profitable. The 4 numbers every business owner should know. It's tempting to close your eyes and avoid looking at your finances because you're scared you won't like what you'll see. Ignorance is not bliss. To make your business profitable and sustainable, you need to know your numbers. To get this free resource, head to zimmermanpodcast.com/know your numbers. That's zimmermanpodcast.com/know your numbers. This past year on my vision board, I had one word written in big bold letters: gratitude. I've built my whole year around that one word, and it changed my life for the better. This week's show is airing the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and I'm celebrating by showing my gratitude to you. How? I'm giving you a one-time code for 50% off anything or everything in my shop at zimmermanpodcast.com/thankful. Contract templates, webinars, the booking reboot, whatever you want, it's yours for 50% off. Just use code THANKFUL at checkout. Just like my attitude of gratitude, this code isn't limited to Thanksgiving week. It'll work one time only, anytime, any day. Celebrate with me and grab all those resources you've been wanting. Again, go to zimmermanpodcast.com/thankful and use code THANKFUL. I just have curiosity questions from a business perspective. Do you rent the vineyard? How does this work?
I buy grapes from various growers. And so, I grew up in agriculture. A lot of my family was in farming. So I was like, I have zero desire to ever go in farming because one, it's a thankless job. Two, a lot of it, just inherent business risk because if you have a bad crop year and stuff. So I was very intentional. A part of my business strategy is sort of that make versus buy. Do you do it all yourself or do you work with experts in various things that are doing aspects already? And so I chose the latter. So I purchase grapes from various growers around France. I have a phenomenal production partner in Burgundy, France, and they handle all of the winemaking attributes from, getting the grapes through to, sending the bottles to the US. And so I'm kind of the orchestrator, if you will. It's like, as a female consumer, I'm the core demographic really, and 80% of bubbles is purchased by females. And so it's like, all right, here's the taste profile that I'm looking for. It's my blend, my brand, my trademark, but they do all of the operational back end for me.
So what happens because there's going to be just like with any industry, there's trends and rosé seems to be, a big trend or that's what a lot of people are drinking. So what do people do? Is there a certain grape that now everyone's after? So then it's supply and demand. So that grape is more expensive. How does all that work?
Absolutely. I mean, most things come back to the simple laws of supply and demand. And so, in the last few years, the U.S. rosé market has exploded, and so that's definitely put pressure on the vineyards to be able to have enough volume in which to supply for the French wines. In the U.S., there's a lot of rosé.
Do they just start planting a bunch more?
Well, it usually takes 5 to 7 years for vines to be viable. I mean, some are 3 or 4, but it's not like Coca Cola where you're like, okay, we need more. Let's like create more. That is the balance point with wine, certainly, because it's the real estate. It's how long it takes to come to fruition, and it's a longer term vision. But definitely, they've started utilizing some other grape varietals, sourcing from some alternate locations as well. And it's hard. Like, do you want to jump on the bandwagon because there's a trend, or you're like, oh, it's oversaturated, or do you feel like, most importantly, that you could still fill a gap? So, Le Grand Courtage, the sparkling wine I launched because of the gap I saw in the price palette packaging. Très Chic Rosé we only launched in this last year, and same approach really, whereas that the font is much bolder, so it really grabs the eye on the shelf. The capsule's a dark navy, which you don't see, and so it was harder to be as competitive with the rosé because there's a flood of new products. But I was like, what makes us visually stand out on the shelf, and what price point do I need to fill in which to be successful in the category, hopefully. And so, whereas that, again, it's sort of that reverse engineering. It's like, all right, I think we need to be $14.99 to $15.99 on the shelf if the market leaders are Whispering Angel and Miraval, and they're $19.99 or $24.99. So it's like, how do we have enough of a gap below that price to compel somebody to want to buy us?
That Très Chic bottle is really beautiful. It's classy, it's beautiful, it's timeless, and that is the kind of thing you wanna give. Like, when you are invited over to someone's house or if someone just got engaged or you wanna take a gift to somebody, like, that is what a beautiful price point, and then it's that light pink rosé. I love that so much better than those dark I don't know if that's just me being, like, snobby about it, but I want you to set the record straight on this, and I'm guilty of this, by the way. I am guilty of this because I do love me some wine, but I often think that if it's more expensive, it's gonna be better. So why do I think that? Why do people think this with wine? I think I've had really inexpensive wine before, maybe from a box in college that, gave me headaches. And so for whatever reason in my head, I've also had really, really good bottles of wine, that did not leave me with a headache. And so how can I get on board with this kind of in between price and feel good about it?
Well, the psychology of price is widely studied, and whether it's jeans or wine or multitude of products, there definitely is a perception that they've done blind studies. It's like, oh, I tasted this and like, oh, this is $100 bottle of wine versus 10. It's like, oh my God, this one's amazing, and they wax on forever about price and why it's so much better, and in reality, it's the exact same wine is the $10 one, but suddenly price made people think differently. Or conversely, they'll intentionally flip price, and you might have a really well scoring wine that's very expensive, and they'll pretend that it's a cheap one in like a focus group, and um, people's perception of the higher priced wine was just so much higher. And so, for whatever reason, there's this innate trigger about price and value perception or quality and things like that that comes into play. But for me, when you look at in the US, a lot of people know very little about wine, and that's okay. It's like there's 300,000 wines or something like that on the market, but it's like, oh, I like a Cabernet or I like a Chardonnay. And outside of a handful of brands, most people don't know very much. And the majority of wine is still purchased under $10 for like kind of your everyday wine. So I wanted like to create something that was approachable, affordable, versatile, elevates the everyday. And isn't going to break the bank. And I kind of use that ATM mentality of like, if it's under 20, people don't like, okay, I pull that one bill from the ATM and it doesn't psychologically register as too expensive. Even if they come in and only wanted to spend 10 or 12, it's like, okay, well, I'll spend 17 or 18 and not feel bad about it or feel like, oh, I'm like this, I'm overindulging and things like that. And so part of my positioning was very intentional about that price point of creating exceptional value perception without being perceived as too cheap or too expensive that people can only buy you occasionally.
It's the perfect price point for those people who, might need it on a weekly basis or couple bottles a week, it's a perfect price point for that, right? So when I go to a wine store and I see a bunch of different bottles of wine and there is yours at $18.99, and then let's say there's another one and it's $59.99 and they look, they're both in the same color and they're beautiful. Is the other one really making that much more profit, or are their expenses higher?
So at the end of the day, like let's use a lot of the big champagne houses or something. It's like they um, have owned their properties for a few hundred years. They don't have the expense of the real estate or things like that. So a lot of spirits brands or wine brands are, frankly, just outside. I mean, you look at a Louis Vuitton. Why does the Louis Vuitton cost what it does versus something else that you just buy at Macy's or Nordstrom's for $40, right? So qualitatively, quantitatively, it doesn't make sense sometimes. So it's just that psychology of price and what people are willing to pay. And usually the high-end brands, their margins and markups are insane comparative. So they're making obviously more on a dollar basis than we are, but on a gross margin basis, theirs is significant because they've already invested in the infrastructure, and they benefit from the economies of scale. And so I think what's really interesting to understand about small companies and emerging small mid-cap companies, their operating expenses, their SG&A, when you look at their financials, they're having to spend a huge percentage of their budgets in which to grow and to try to reach scale, but they're not efficient yet. And so it's really difficult for small brands to compete against the big guys. One, because they don't have the margins, and two, their sales, their marketing, the finance and admin, all the back end stuff is very expensive because they haven't reached scale. Like, it's not unusual for a young brand to be north of 50% versus a highly efficient company. They may be at 20, 25%. So imagine if their overall sales, marketing, things like that is only 20, 25% of their overall versus other brands are at 50, how hard it is for them to be, the young brand to be competitive.
Ah, that all makes so much sense. Thank you for explaining that. We said in the beginning that you're kind of a serial entrepreneur. Do you have plans to do something else? Do you have an exit strategy of your own? Do you think that this will be something that you do forever, or do you think that you will pivot into something else? And let me ask this question. If you do, or if one would one day decide to be done with this chapter, right? Do you try to sell it as it is, or do you go to a bigger house, a bigger brand, and see if they want to take it on as well? I often think about Bethany Frankel and her Skinny Girl beverages and how that just all kind of lined up really beautifully. She was able to keep her brand, but it was a smart deal. But then let a bigger house take over the alcohol portion. And I just wonder what your thoughts are about, your own exit strategy.
Well, when I was saying earlier, like, oh, be clear about your exit plan. It's like when I started this, I was thinking, oh, recurring revenue stream, and it's a great lifestyle business. Though I thought it's a crap load of work and far more labor intensive and complex than I ever really imagined. But I wasn't thinking I would have to raise as much capital as I did, and so we've raised over $3 million to date. I'm in the middle of a capital round, and so partly my comment about know your exit plan is influenced by my own personal realities in this journey and what's become. And so when you're taking on capital, the expectation by investors is you either need to um, recapitalize and pay them back in 5 to 7 years typically, or there needs to be an exit. So I wasn't looking to sell, but then you realize the gross realities of this industry. It's like down the line, and you think about the deal that Bethany Frankel got, where she remained as creative director and is getting to build brand, and yet has this huge sales force and team, and to be able to really realize your vision. There's obviously some merits in that, and it's exciting. You give up a lot of controls, but if you kind of separate the ego and I want it to be mine versus, oh, I really want to bring this to life in the full vision that I had imagined. And it's like it's a very personal decision, but I do think that there's a lot of opportunity of thinking about that strategic acquisition, or where they take a position in your company and invest, and maybe they become the sales and marketing arm. And so I do think it's pretty interesting as you evaluate those longer term decisions, and you think about both a national as well as a global footprint for a brand like ours, which is entirely possible at this stage of, given the size and scale that we've reached. It's like, okay, what's next, and what do I need to have as a team versus if I morphed under another organization, what it could become.
Hmm. What do you think? Let's say the whole wine industry went belly up tomorrow and you had to do something new. What do you think your new business would be? What are you interested in right now?
um, my love of architecture and real estate combined with my love of food and wine. I think my what really would feed my soul, I'd love to have a chateau or something, or this beautiful property on a lake or an ocean, and have a boat or whatever, and be able to really do retreats. Like, I'd love to be able to have retreats for women entrepreneurs, things like that, which are really to amplify and up level and think about the true life that you want. And our philosophy on every bottle is embrace life, dream big, accept all invitations. And it really comes down to kind of that live joyously and creating moments that sort of feed you at the core. And so I think if time and money weren't an issue, and if I could parlay my original career in architecture and development with wine, and be able to have these beautiful spaces that bring people together to celebrate life, constantly learn and grow, and have like an educational component that really helps to elevate the everyday and help people think about improving life, business, all those. I think that would be sort of the perfect combination of both of my worlds.
Well, I want to sign up for that retreat if and when it happens, and I want to buy some wine. So tell me right now, how do we get your wine? How do we get it in our refrigerator, at our doorstep? How do we make this happen?
You can find us online at legrandcourtage.com, which is LE and then Grand, GRAND, and Courtage, COURTAGE.com. So certainly check out the beautiful website, a great Instagram, and it's. And we're coming. We're now across the U.S. in 47 states, and it helps if you ask your local retailer and look for us in supermarkets over the coming year. So we're starting to load into a lot more of the grocery stores. So it's an exciting time for the brand.
Are you in Arkansas? I'm probably the one state you're not in.
We are not there, but it's funny. I actually used to live in Arkansas.
Well, did you really?
I did.
No one used to live in Arkansas that I talked to. Are you kidding? Where do you live?
Conway.
Shut up.
Is that where you live?
Yes.
Oh my
You're
gosh.
not serious.
I did. Well, we'll have to. I didn't know that, and I know, but we'll have to talk
That's where I'm
offline.
sitting right now, just sitting here in Conway, Arkansas.
Small world.
Get out of town. Okay, so there's hope for me to go to Thailand. Okay, good. I like it. Okay, so I have a final question, and you may have already kind of answered it, but I always like to end with this one. If you had Oprah's money, okay, so billions of dollars, and you had to spend it on something totally selfish for yourself, what would you spend it on?
It's like, what would Oprah do? Instead of what would Jesus do, what would Oprah do?
What would you? But that's the thing, it has to be selfish. Because people always are confused with this question, and it makes so much sense to me because I think what your answer is shows really like what really motivates you in your life.
I would say really my answer is much like or parlays on what I was just saying about the chateau. It's like I personally would love to have this amazing property that brings people together to truly, celebrate that spirit of the French spirit of the joie de vivre, the joy of life. And I would love to have be able to do the retreats and think about, it's like whether it's female retreats that are about empowerment, if it's entrepreneur retreats of like, how do you create, 7-figure business? I even think it'd be amazing to be able to bring this to concept of retreats and entrepreneurialism to high school and colleges and think about really inspiring and motivating the next generation of leaders and what it takes. Because it's like, you think of all these things that you and I are discussing today. If you could bestow that and know a lot of what we know today at a much younger age, just how much more successful people would be in life and in business and not stress themselves out so much. And so I actually my grander plan of sort of what's next beyond Courtage is things that are about really approaching life with intention and creating this true life that you want. And it's like, and I think it's reframing, because a lot of times I have to do this. And it's like, instead of I have to do this, instead say I get to do this. And it's like coming back to, what's in alignment, how do I make a difference? And so, it's mine, I think is more of giving back more, but also feeding my own soul of like, I just love, bringing people together and, sharing in life. So long answer to your question, but
No, I love it. And I think, the more years we live on this earth, that sounds so cheesy, but it's true. The more years we live, the more wisdom we gain, and the more it becomes about impact and helping others and teaching what we know, right? So I love that. Tawnya, I can't thank you enough for being here. I feel like I've learned so much about just your industry, your business, and your path. So thank you for sharing with us how important knowing your numbers are and annual planning and all of those good things. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks for having me, and it was so much fun.
If you loved what you heard today, even if you liked it a lot, you should subscribe and leave a review. We'll see you back here next time in the Zimmerman Podcast.